Is it cringe? Or do they just have more confidence than you? It feels safer to say, that's cringe, than to admit, I don't feel confident enough to do that. Hi everyone, I'm Lisa, and welcome back to Self-Awareness Sucks. Now before we get into it, I just want to say, I'm not a psychologist, a therapist, or a medical professional, and I'm not claiming to be, and I'm not here to give advice or a diagnosis. Everything I share in this podcast is based on my own experiences, thoughts, and observations, so please take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and if you are struggling with anything I mention, please do reach out to a qualified professional or at least someone you trust. Now, I'm particularly excited about today's episode. And you've seen the title, so you probably already have a sense of where we're going. And it's a phrase I've seen circulating online, I want to say, over the last year or so. And you might have come across it too. But when it hit me hard. And I think it's because it resonates with me on a more personal level than I originally thought. To be cringe is to be free. And this connects directly to what I've been building across the last couple of episodes. You know, the responsibility of doing the internal work yourself and also the permission to make choices without having to justify them. And this episode is about what happens when you actually start living that way. When you stop waiting until you're ready or polished or certain no one is going to judge you and you just do the thing anyway. And the realization came to me in two layers, and they actually happened a few months apart. So the first time was when I was watching a clip of Tom Holland doing an acting exercise on The Graham Norton Show with Tom Hanks. And Tom Hanks was explaining an exercise where you deliver the same line repeatedly with a different emotion every single time. He asked Tom Holland to do it with him, and I think the line was something about begging for coffee or something like that. But every time Tom Hanks said his line, Tom Holland had to respond differently. And so I was sitting there watching it, and even though it's acting and it's on TV and it's literally the whole point of the show, I'm the one who started to feel really uncomfortable. And I was getting secondhand embarrassment and feeling cringed out on Tom Holland's behalf, which is just wild to say out loud. But then I caught myself and I thought, wait, this is his job. He's an actor. He literally trains for this. His entire career is built on portraying emotions and doing exercises exactly like this one. And he is probably completely unfazed by it. So why was I cringing on his behalf? And I really wanted to figure this out. So I was thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I think part of what made me feel so uncomfortable was this status element. So here's Tom Holland with genuine presence and reputation in Hollywood, and he's absolutely earned his place and has his own merits and his own legacy and his own standing. And he's being asked by Tom Hanks, who I think is largely perceived as an absolute legend of film, to do something that feels exposed and vulnerable in front of a very large audience. And I realised that for me, the cringe was amplified by that specifically. Like, the higher the perceived status, the more uncomfortable the vulnerability felt to watch. As if someone at Tom Holland's level, one that is fresher and newer, I guess it's he. He of course has his own legacy that he's built, and he is an incredible actor. But it almost felt like him doing this exercise wasn't supposed to be seen, and this moment that felt quite unguarded wasn't meant to be so exposed. And when you sit with that, it's a really specific thing to unpack, because what does it say about how we relate to vulnerability in people that we've put on a pedestal? And what does it say about how we relate to our own vulnerability? The idea that once you've reached a certain point or built a certain reputation, are you not supposed to be seen struggling or uncertain or exposed? And that was just the first layer. So a few months went by, and the second layer came to me when I was scrolling through TikTok and came across someone doing a no makeup to full glam video, and they were just lip syncing and dancing, doing a transition, nothing crazy. And most of the comments were supportive, but there were a few repetitive ones saying, "Oh my God, this is so cringe." And even though I've seen that comment before, for some reason this particular time I paused on it. And I was going to reply, and then I just thought, do you know what? There's no point, because I'm only going to be starting a debate or argument with someone I don't even know, and it's just a waste of my time because our opinions are going to differ. But this time around, it just stayed with me all day. And at some point, when I was mulling it over, literally, I'm pretty sure it was the only thing I was thinking about all day, I had a line drop into my head. Is it cringe, or do they just have more confidence than you? And I remember I stopped what I was doing, and I was like, that's a really good point. Because I was trying to figure out, why was it cringe? Why do we think this is something that is not something we should be doing? And why would I feel cringed out by it? And I thought that, well, I don't have the confidence to do that. And then that line came in. Is it cringe, or do they just have more confidence than you? And this person in particular that I was watching, they are, as far as I can tell, just a lot more confident than I am, so I would never be able to do that video. And we label so many things as cringe, especially when someone is putting themselves online in front of an audience, being visible and expressive and unapologetic, and we pull it apart and we call it cheesy and we call it try hard and we call it cringe. But is it actually that? Or do we just not have the confidence to do it ourselves? Because that's exactly how I felt. And I know it might sound really harsh, but just think about it for a moment. As far as we're aware, actors don't find what they do cringe. Or if they do, they don't let it stop them. Or at least they don't show that they find it cringe. They do it because it's what they're passionate about, and they've built the confidence to be seen doing it, to the point where it's just normal to them. Influencers now, they'll set up cameras in public and they'll film content and post it. And they focus on what they're building, not on how they might look failing at it. For example, you might see a dance video, and if it's outside, you can see the daylight change, and you can see how long it's taking to do in the middle of the street, and they're doing it anyway, and they're posting it anyway. And so I think that that's a really freeing way to exist. Because here's what I think is actually happening when we cringe at someone else. And this kind of comes from the idea of how when you're judgmental about someone else, it tends to be an insecurity that you have in yourself. So just bear with me. I think that we're not really reacting to them, to the person doing the thing that we're finding cringe. I think that we project ourselves into the situation, that we imagine doing whatever it is, failing at it, being judged for it, and then that's essentially what makes us feel uncomfortable. Not the thing itself, but just our own imagined version of it going wrong. And just a quick question, would it feel cringe if you imagined it going right? So, on that, instead of sitting with that feeling and realising it's not actually a big deal, we project outwards and we call it cringe. And I think sometimes it can be a bit of a taste judgment, or it feels that way, but really it's a fear response. And I think that fear can disguise itself as taste, or maybe even superiority, because it feels safer to say that's cringe than to admit I don't feel confident enough to do that, or I don't feel comfortable to do that. And that's the part that gets me, because the people, specifically people we label as cringe, are often just unafraid to be themselves. They're just being expressive and vulnerable and playful and visible, and they're taking up space without apologising for it. And instead of praising that, in a way, we've decided to call that cringe instead. Now, I'm not saying nothing is ever cringe. Of course, there are still things that make us wince or tense inside, awkward memories or genuinely uncomfortable moments, or things that feel cheesy in a way that's hard to shake. Because that's normal, that's a human reaction. But secondhand embarrassment, the kind where someone else is just confidently doing something, I think that's worth examining. Because when you're doing something that makes you happy, you're not thinking about how you're coming across, right? You're just in it, you're present. And you're not thinking about other people's opinions, because they just don't exist in that moment. A personal example for me is Disneyland. I know this sounds like a bit of an aside, but it does relate, I promise. I never went as a child. I've never been to Disney World either. I'd never been at this point. Other than Disneyland, I'd been on once for a 1-day trip during a school trip, like week-long trip to Paris, right? We spent 1 day at Disneyland, and 1 day is not enough to do everything and truly embrace it. And I had no idea what I was doing when I was there. And I barely remember that trip. So my cousin and I decided to go as adults. We started out just by looking at prices in, I want to say, like May 2024. And then we ended up booking it on the spot. And whilst I was there, and whilst I was booking it, it was genuinely healing, because I was giving myself an experience I'd never had with my own money. And when people asked why I was going, I said I'd never been properly. And everyone understood. It was fine. But then, following that, we ended up booking another trip to Disneyland and going twice in the span of 6 months, pretty much. We went in September 2024 and then again in May 2025. And suddenly I felt like I had to explain myself, even though nothing had actually changed. We went just because we wanted to, and that was it. There was no other reasons beyond that, other than we felt like it and we could, and so we did it. And whilst I was there, I wasn't thinking about whether anyone found it cringe or found me cringe. And also, that's the beauty of Disneyland as well. It's like you're on such a high all the time, because there's so much going on and there's so much to do, that you're not thinking about anything else. I certainly was not. I was thinking about the rides and the food and how much fun I was having, and other people's opinions just didn't even cross my mind. And so I'm now trying to take that into everyday life. But here's where it connects, of course, back to self-awareness, and specifically why self-awareness sucks in this context. Because when you're self-aware, you're already hyper-conscious of how you're coming across. You're monitoring yourself constantly, how you look, how you sound, whether you're being perceived the way you want to be. And I think that self-monitoring can kill spontaneity, and it can stop you from being present, and it turns living into performing. And this is where there is a real difference between self-awareness and self-surveillance. I think one helps you grow, and the other can just keep you stuck. And I think that cringe is a really specific symptom of that. It's what happens when the self-surveillance gets so loud that you can't just do something without imagining how it looks from the outside. You're not actually in the experience, you're just watching yourself have it. Almost like how I would think of it, like when you're in a dream and you're watching it unfold, but at the same time experiencing it. But it's all a little bit just disjointed. And I think that social media has, to an extent, made this worse. Because being perceived now feels constant. Like there's always an audience, even when there isn't. But then you have the other side of it, where social media has also helped in a weird way. People make content about awkward interactions now. How those moments when you say, "Oh, you too," to a cinema worker, when they say, "Oh, enjoy the film," and you just say it without thinking. Or if a server in a restaurant says to you, "Oh, enjoy the meal," and you say, "You too." People literally talk about this all the time, and as far as I can gather, we find it relatable because we've all done it. And somehow, seeing those moments turned into content, I think, for me, makes it easier to brush it off, because it's normalizing the awkwardness, and it reminds you that everyone does it. Because the truth is, no one is thinking about you as much as you think they are. People won't remember your awkward moment tomorrow, let alone years from now. Trust me, it's probably not going to be the last thought they have when they're in their old pensioner's home. And I actively try not to be embarrassed anymore. If someone asks, "Oh, are you not embarrassed by that?" I say, "Oh, I don't care." And weirdly, it works. Even if at first I do care, the more I say I don't, the more I believe it. And actually, I do care less. I genuinely, very, very, very rarely feel embarrassed anymore. So to be cringe really is to be free, because it means switching the self-surveillance off. It means doing the thing anyway, even if it feels awkward, even when your hands shake, even when you're not sure how it's going to go. I think it means being in your life rather than observing it from a safe distance. And I'm not going to lie, I still do this sometimes. I still catch myself thinking, "Oh my God, that's cringe." But now I try to pause and ask, is it actually cringe? Or is it something I'm just scared to try? And I'll be honest, this podcast is part of that for me. Performing in front of people, speaking, presenting. I genuinely find it nerve-wracking. If it's a room full of people and I have to do it face to face, my hands are shaking, my voice is shaking, I'm sweating lightly, I go very quiet, I lose all confidence. But with this podcast, I'm doing it anyway, because it matters to me. And because, as I've said in previous episodes, wanting to is enough. And as I always do, I'll leave you with one question to sit with if it resonates. What's something you secretly want to do but keep stopping yourself from because you've decided it's cringe? It's not something to answer out loud, and don't feel you have to. Maybe just something to notice. But if you do want to share, please do. I'd be really interested to see in what you have to say. But anyway, I'll stop there before I spiral into a full existential monologue. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!